Do you like train watching as much as I do? Well, if not, this video will teach you. Here we're just going to prepare for an operating session in the future, and I'm going to run some trains around to try to get them ready. It doesn't seem very interesting, but you know, if you like watching trains, this is as good as anything. That's why we build model railroads, right? This is Burr Stewart, and welcome to part 57 of my continuing series of model railroad operations videos, mostly shot on my home layout, which models the Burlington Northern in 1973. Today we have a real treat in store with some high horsepower BN diesels that we needed to reposition up into the Spokane staging yard. Somehow, in the middle of all this, my friend Robin brought over his British equipment, and as you can hear, there was quite a bit to hear.
Stand well away from the edge of platform 4. The approaching train is not scheduled to stop at this station.
What will they think of next? I'll tell you one thing, I'm not about to build platform 4 just so that announcement will make any sense here. This operation has nothing to do with my railroad, but we certainly can call it train watching, can't we? It's also true that these are OO scale models, which is a ratio of 1 to 72, instead of the HO models that we're normally seeing here, which are 1 to 87.1. So figure that out. There's the Squid Bridge, always a crowd pleaser.
Is that something the yard does?
Now this train is rolling around into the Bayside Yard in Everett, past the engine terminal station and along the main line inside the yard. Wait for that weird sounding horn. I don't know who gave him permission to go so fast in the yard. Seems dangerous. Now this is a shot of our Interbay yard in North Seattle.
I got a through freight coming through on the main.
Yep. All right. In fact, stop.
Sounds like some things are about to happen, but I wanted to show you this Micro Mark lit up uncoupling pick in action. The tip of it is kind of blunt. I think it's designed for O scale. So we've been trimming the point of it to get it sharper and sharper, and it took them all this time to get that uncoupled, as you can see. So we're still adjusting it. I can't get too good a shot for you here, but we're still trimming it down so that it's small enough to use an HO scale. Don't be afraid to take a file to it. Does caboose watching count as train watching? I think so. This is an ex CB&Q unit that was painted BN green, a brass Overland model. Well, you can see in the distance we have some big horsepower coming our way. Now this is our first legitimate repositioning move. This train is supposed to be eastbound from Chicago, which is why it has these 6-axle high horsepower units on it. But it needs to be turned around and sent back up to the eastern staging yard up in Skycomish and then reblocked so that it will come into the railroad in the right order and with the right loads in the open hoppers. There you can hear my new grade crossing bells. Very good. Well, so much for those lovely engines. Let's give you a view of the rest of the train. You can see some empty wood ship cars that are supposed to be loaded wood ship cars. We'll get to that a little bit later. And some other assorted loads that make a little bit more sense. And another beautiful caboose. Well, you recognize this train from before. Now Dave has run it all the way to the south end of the railroad, come around the reverse loop, and is heading northbound. Actually eastbound in the case of this train. And all we have to do now is get it back up to Everett, restage it, and then put it in the staging track in Skykomish. Here we're in Stacy Street, going on Main 2, which is also called the Eastward Main, next to the mud track, which is vacant, and against the wall there is the maintenance of way train on what I call the house track, which is where all the freight terminals were. Oh, look, now we're going to have a meet. Excellent. I think this might be the train that we just saw come through the Seattle tunnel that ended up with a CB&Q gray caboose. We can confirm that when we get to see the ends of the two trains. Don't you just love those sloped radiator grills on the SD45s? I know I do. Well, now this train is occupying Main 1, also called the westbound main, as it approaches the grade crossing at Royal Brome. But we're going to head over and see the two cabooses pass. Oh look, I was wrong. The train with the gray caboose has already turned around and is heading back underneath downtown Seattle. This area over here on the left is the Milwaukee car barge up to Port Townsend and eventually Port Angeles. And my friend Eric Van Nice had the brilliant idea of modeling the water underneath the barge, so we put a couple of freight cars that had fallen off the barge in the past and had never been recovered. Kind of a fun modeling exercise there. We can't figure out how to make fish swim around in there, but one day that'll be technically feasible. This is a modification of the Walther's tugboat kit that another one of my friends did to put the steam engine in. Well, a few minutes later, our eastbound train, which is supposed to be a westbound train after we restage it, has now arrived in Everett on the upper track there, and the other train is passing us on the low line. You can see that string of wood chip cars is still empty. We need to put loads in that and then reposition it up in Skykomish. There's a nice 40-foot NDM car there going down to Mexico from Vancouver. You never know what you're going to run into when you're rail fanning. Well, a few minutes later, I was able to get those wood chip loads into the wood chip hoppers, as you can see here, and we're climbing up the grade to Skykomish. When these loaded cars come back into the layout, they'll need to be spotted at Everett's Scott Paper Mill. These wood chip cars on the prototype were built in the late 60s, There was a picture in the Great Northern Railway Historical Society magazine that just came out a couple of days ago showing one of these great sky blue hoppers still in maintenance service on the BNSF over 60 years after they were built. Also, they pointed out that they're not hoppers, they're gondola cars because they don't open underneath. So I misspoke. These are wood-ship gondolas. As you know, if you've watched other videos on my channel, we're climbing around the Index Loop on the way up to Skykomish, Washington. And that mountain on the backdrop is Mount Index. These B&S D40-2s really do look good with that long snout, don't they? If you look really carefully, you can see the roller bearing caps turning on this U-boat. A really spectacular model by Rivarossi. Well, as we haul into the Skykomish yard in preparation for reversing direction on the Rainbow Bridge, this gives us a chance to admire our train one last time. Little farming equipment there. Columbian cowlets, that might be out of era. I'll have to look into why that's an empty flat, but there is a reason it is. Waybills don't lie. Nice caboose too. I think that's an Atlas model. Well, that about wraps it up for today's rail fanning spectacular. I hope you've enjoyed it, and you'll look at the other videos on my channel. So for now, this is Burr Stewart wishing you much fun with trains.